particularly welcome. What discussion has he had with trade organisations in Northern Ireland about the Trader Support Service, and when does he anticipate the service actually providing services to SMEs?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend. He's absolutely right. We have had continuing engagement with businesses, as well as not just myself, but ministerial colleagues, the Business Secretary and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster have both been in Northern Ireland engaging with businesses and representative organisations, as is my colleague, the Minister of State, and we will continue to do that, and we aim to have this scheme running in September.
John Morrissey.
Question 21, Mr Speaker.
Thank
Minister
you,
Walker.
Mr Speaker. Self-isolation exemptions have been in place since the 5th of July for the whole of the United Kingdom for all international cast and crew working on qualifying TV and film productions. We've worked closely with the Northern Ireland Executive and the film and TV industry, which has been a major success in Northern Ireland and represents a significant part of its economy, estimated to be worth £270 million a year. This has seen important projects such as the Northman and Line of Duty restart filming, bringing significant investment to Northern Ireland's economy.
John Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree that the quarantine exemption arrangements could be the catalyst for reigniting the Northern Ireland film industry, where 49 locations were used for Game of Thrones, including Winterfell? And although the days of House Stark have passed, I hope that this exemption will allow for Northern Ireland to continue to be a beacon for the film industry across the world.
Walker.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and as I said, over the summer we introduced those exemptions, and we absolutely recognise what a crucial and important sector this is, and the benefits of its success can be seen across Northern Ireland, not least for the tourism industry. And local success stories such as Game of Thrones and the Derry Girls benefit every part of Northern Ireland. Programmes like The Fall have firmly established Northern Ireland as an ideal destination for film and TV projects, and the restart of filming in significant projects shows that this industry can continue to achieve global success.
Stephanie Peacock.
Question number 22, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 22 and 23 together. The Government recognises that this industry is key to Northern Ireland's economic success, with the sector in Northern Ireland valued at over £1.8 billion. Like many sectors, aerospace has come under immense pressure during the pandemic. This is why we put unprecedented levels of support into place through the Job Retention Scheme and the Bank of England's COVID Corporate Finance Facility. Last week, I met with Bombardier at their short site and stratospheric platforms to discuss the challenges and opportunities for developing that sector and how the UK Government can support their success.
Stephanie Peacock.
Ministers seem to be doing little more than shrugging their shoulders as the UK's world-leading aerospace sector goes to the wall. When will they step in with sector-specific support?
Minister.
Well, I'd say to the Honourable Lady that the UK Government has made available £2.1 billion to the UK aerospace sector through the COVID Corporate Financing Facility and additional flexibility for UK export finance, which is supporting £3.5 billion of sales in the next 18 months. But I continue to work closely with my colleague, the Aerospace Minister, my Honourable friend for Stratford-on-Avon, and I'm determined that we do support the businesses in Northern Ireland as across the UK.
Gavin Robbins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I do trust that the Minister's visit was successful to Bombardier last week. He knows how important aerospace is to the Northern Ireland economy, but he also knows that there's a cliff edge coming in the job retention scheme and the support that's there for our aerospace sector particularly. He also knows that should redundancies continue, should the situation get worse, the skills will be lost and they won't come back. So the time is coming. The talk is talk. We need to see action, and we need to see a bespoke package of support for aerospace in Northern Ireland and across the United Kingdom.
Minister.
Well, I absolutely sympathise with the point the honourable gentleman is making and the crucial importance of this sector and its skills to his constituency. And the COVID-19 outbreak has seen a severe impact on aviation and aerospace industries around the world. The UK Government has provided significant support to the sector, including the Business Interruption Scheme and the Job Retention Scheme. The Chancellor has confirmed that commitment remains in place until October. But one of the things I discussed with Bombardier in my visit last week is the vital importance of maintaining that skills base, and that is a point I will absolutely take to colleagues across government.
Cheryl Murray.
Question 24, please, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The threat from dissident Republican terrorism does continue to be severe in Northern Ireland. The Government's first priority is to keep people safe and secure across the UK. Terrorism, paramilitary violence and criminality have no place in Northern Ireland. They must not hold us back from progress towards a peaceful and prosperous future. And as I said earlier on, thanks to the hard work and professionalism of the Police Service of Northern Ireland and their partners, 10 people have recently been arrested and charged with a range of terrorism offences under the Terrorism Act. These arrests are the biggest step in tackling violent dissident Republicans in Northern Ireland in a generation, and I thank the PSNI for their work.
Sean Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What action has the government taken to protect those who provided security in Northern Ireland, both in the police and military, from vexatious historic accusations?
Thank
my honourable friend for her question, and we as a government are clear. We will put an end to vexatious claims against our brilliant armed forces. We are also determined to address the legacy of the Troubles, as I set out in my written ministerial statement on the 18th of March, and we will deliver on that.
That's the end of Northern Ireland questions, so we're now coming towards Prime Ministers as we await. Can I wish the Leader of the Opposition happy birthday as well? So we now come to question 1 from Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much. 3 weeks ago today, the community in my constituency of West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, and indeed I think the entire country was rocked by the events on the railway line just south of Stonehaven, the tragic events in which 3 men, Brett McCulloch, Chris Stutchbury and Donald Dinny, tragically lost their lives. I'm sure my right honourable friend, indeed the whole House, will join me in sending our deepest condolences to the family and friends of those 3 men today, as well as our thanks and heartfelt gratitude to the incredible men and women of our emergency services and multiple agencies who worked in incredibly difficult conditions to help the survivors from that incident. The interim report is on the desk of the Transport Secretary as we speak, and I know that the full report will take time to run its course, as is only right. But what assurances can my right honourable friend give my constituents that the serious questions that they have will be answered, any recommendations will be implemented, and that the government will do everything it can to prevent an accident like this from ever happening again?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and I know the whole House will want to join with me in sending our condolences to the family and friends of Brett McCulloch, Donald Dinny and Christopher Stutchbury. And I would like to join my honourable friend in paying tribute to the extraordinary work of the emergency services and the public for the bravery that they showed. Britain's railways are among the safest in Europe, partly because we take accidents like this so seriously, and therefore we must ensure that we learn the lessons of this tragic event to make sure that no such incident recurs in the future.
Now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Can I join with the Prime Minister on those comments about the tragic events of just a few weeks ago? Mr. Speaker, can I also begin by paying tribute to John Hume, who passed away during recess. John was a beacon of light in the most troubled of times. He'll be seriously missed. Mr. Speaker, let me start today with the exams fiasco. On the day that thousands of young people had their A-level grades downgraded, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him, "The exam results are robust. They're good. They're dependable." The Education Secretary said there would absolutely not be a U-turn. A few days later, a U-turn. We learned yesterday that the Education Secretary knew well in advance that there was a problem with the algorithm. So a straight answer to a straight question, please, Prime Minister. When did the Prime Minister first know that there was a problem with the algorithm?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps I could begin by congratulating the right honourable gentleman on his birthday and say to him that on the exams and the stress that young people have been through over the summer, both the Secretary of State for Education and I understand very well how difficult it has been for them and for their families going through a pandemic at a time when we have not been able, because of that pandemic, in common with most other countries in the world, to stage normal examinations. And as a result of what we learned about the tests, the results that had come in, we did institute a change. We did act. The students, the pupils of this country, now do have their grades. And I really ask the right honourable gentleman whether he will join me in congratulating those pupils on their hard work and whether he agrees with me that they deserve the grades they've got.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I've already expressed congratulations to all those students, and I do so again. But I want to go back to my question, which the Prime Minister avoided. And I know why he avoided it. Because he either knew of the problem with the algorithm and did nothing, or he didn't know when he should have. So let me ask again, when did the Prime Minister first know there'd be a problem with the algorithm?
Mr. Speaker, as he knows perfectly well, Ofqual made it absolutely clear time and again that in their view the system that was in place was robust. Ofqual is, as he knows, an independent organisation, and credit had to be given to their views. All summer long, Mr. Speaker, he's been going around undermining confidence, spreading doubts, and in particular about the return to school in safe conditions, and it's absolutely true. And today is a great day because the parents, the pupils of this country, the teachers of this country are overwhelmingly proving him wrong and proving the doubters wrong, Mr. Speaker, because they are going back to school in record numbers in spite of all the gloom and dubitation that he tried to spread. And I think it would be a fine thing, Mr. Speaker, if today, after 3 months of refusing to do so, as pupils go back to school, if today finally he said that school was safe to go back to. Come on.
Keir Starmer.
Prime Minister is just tin-eared and making it up as he goes along. I'm surprised. The Education Secretary stood at that dispatch box yesterday and said and acknowledged that Labour's first priority has been getting children back to school. That's been our first priority. I've said it numerous times in this dispatch box. He knows it very well. He's just playing games. Mr. Speaker, and he's fooling nobody. Even his own MPs have run out of patience. The Vice Chair of the 22 Committee, the MP for Broxbourne, has said the government says one thing on Monday, changes its mind on Tuesday, something different is presented on Wednesday. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Another of his MPs, who wisely wants to remain anonymous, perhaps in the chamber today, he or she said, I am speaking for you because this is what was said, it's mess after mess. His own MPs, U-turn after U-turn. It's a fundamental issue of competence. God knows what's going on. There's no grip. His own MPs are right, aren't they?
Mr. Speaker, this is a leader of the opposition who backed remaining in the EU and now is totally silent on the side. Now has performed a U-turn. He backed, and perhaps he still does, Mr. Speaker. This is a leader of the opposition who supported an IRA condoning politician who wanted to get out of NATO and now says absolutely nothing. This is a leader of the opposition who sat on the front bench whilst there was anti-Semitism.
I think there are questions being asked. We do need to try and answer the questions that's being put to the Prime Minister. It will be helpful to those who are watching to know the answers. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think it will be helpful to all those who are watching to know.
Prime Minister, I think I'll make the decisions today. Come on, Prime Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, if I may say, I think it will be helpful to all those who are watching to know that this opposition and this leader of the opposition said absolutely nothing to oppose the method of examinations that was proposed, and indeed they opposed the teacher accreditation system that we eventually came up with. Is he now saying that those grades aren't right, or is it just Captain Hindsight leaping on a bandwagon and opposing a policy that he supported 2 weeks ago?
Yes, Starmer.
The problem is he's governing in hindsight. That's why he's making so many mistakes. Mr. Speaker, before I go on, the Prime Minister said something about the IRA, and I want him to take it back. I worked in Northern Ireland for 5 years with the police service of Northern Ireland, bringing peace. I prosecuted the Director of Public Prosecution, serious terrorist, for 5 years, working with the intelligence and security forces and with the police in Northern Ireland. Asked the Prime Minister to have the decency to withdraw that comment. Mr. Prime Minister, it's the same every time. Pretend the problem doesn't exist, brush away scrutiny, make the wrong decision, then blame somebody else. This has got to change, because the next major decision for the Prime Minister is on the furlough scheme. The jobs of millions of people are at risk. The longer he delays, the more they're at risk. So will he act now, finally get this decision right, and commit to extend the furlough for those sectors and those workers that desperately need it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing in this government is getting people back to school, getting our pupils back to school in spite of all the doubts that he's tried to sow, and we are getting people back to work. What he wants to do is extend the furlough scheme, on which this country has already spent £40 billion. What we would rather do is get people into work through our Kickstart scheme, which we are launching today, £2 billion to spend to support people, young people in particular, to get the jobs that they need. He wants to keep people out of work in suspended animation. We want to move this country forward. That's the difference between him and us.
Can I just say there was a question about the allegation and all that? I was very concerned that was the point I was making. I think, in fairness, I'm sure you would like to withdraw.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to say that I think that I listened to the protestations of the right honourable gentleman. I think they would have been more. They would have been more in order throughout the long years in which he supported a leader of the Labour Party.
Leave it as it was. Yes.
When the Prime Minister has worked with the security and intelligence forces prosecuting criminals and terrorists, he can lecture me. I asked him to do the decent thing, but doing the decent thing and this Prime Minister don't go together. This has been a wasted summer. The government should have spent it preparing for the autumn and winter. Instead, they've lurched from crisis to crisis, U-turn to U-turn. To correct one error, even two might make sense. But when the government's notched up 12 U-turns and rising, the only conclusion is serial incompetence. That serial incompetence is holding Britain back. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility and finally get a grip?
Mr. Speaker, I take full responsibility for everything that has happened under this government throughout my period in office. And actually what has happened so far is that we have succeeded in turning the tide of this pandemic. And in spite of the negativity and the constant sniping from the opposition, we are seeing a country that is not only going back to school, but going back to work. Britain is in the lead in developing vaccines. We are in the lead in finding cures for this disease, and dexamethasone, in finding treatments for this disease. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, we are taking this country forward in spite of the extreme difficulties that we face. What I think the people of this country would appreciate is he and I, the Labour front bench, everybody across this House, coming together and uniting and saying that it is safe for kids to get back to school. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, we still have not heard that. Those words from the right honourable gentleman. Will he now say school is safe?
I've said it so many times. School is safe. My own children have been in school throughout. There's no issue on this. The Prime Minister is seeking to divide instead of... I wrote to him on the 18th of May in confidence and in private, offering my support to him to get kids back to school. The only reason they weren't back before the summer was because of his incompetent Education Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will recall that before the recess, I asked him if he would meet the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group. I had the privilege of meeting the families on the 15th of July. They gave me incredibly moving accounts of how COVID-19 had taken their loved ones from them. On Sky News last week, the Prime Minister was asked if he would meet the families. And he said, and I'll quote, "Of course I will meet the bereaved. Of course I will do that." But yesterday, they received a letter from the Prime Minister saying that meeting them was now, regrettably, not possible. The Prime Minister will understand the frustration and the hurt of those families that he said one thing to camera and another to them. Can I urge the Prime Minister to reconsider, to do the right thing and find time to meet these grieving families?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if I may say to the right honourable gentleman, it's absolutely typical of him that he should frame it in that way, because when I made that answer, of course I was very happy to meet the families of the bereaved, and I sympathise deeply with all those who have lost loved ones throughout this pandemic, and we all feel their pain and their grief. But it turns out that this particular group that he refers to are currently in litigation against the government, and I will certainly meet them once that litigation is concluded. But I may say to him, it would be a better thing, rather than trying to score points in that way, if he joined together with us and with this government and said not only is school safe, But it is also safe to go back to India. By the way, Mr. Speaker, that's the first time in 4 months he said it. As I'm delighted to have extracted it from him over this dispatch box. He's never said it to me in the House of Commons. I hope, Mr. Speaker, he will also say that it is safe for the workforce of this country to go back to work in a COVID-secure way. We want to take this country forward. We're not only getting the pandemic under control, with deaths down, with hospital admissions way, way down. We will continue to tackle it with local lockdowns, with our superlative test and trace system, which, by the way, before they sneer, before they mock at it, Mr. Speaker, has now conducted more tests than any other country in Europe. And he might hail that rather than sneering at this country's achievements.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Discussions in the joint committee established under the withdrawal agreement will have the most crucial bearing on the future of trade, not only between the UK and the EU, but also within the UK itself. Unless otherwise agreed in that committee, goods passing from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will be subject to the full rigour of the European Customs Code and also to the imposition of tariffs. That would be quite unacceptable, so will my right honourable friend commit to do whatever it takes to ensure that it does not happen?
Prime Minister.
Yes, my right honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the concern that he does, and we must, of course, and will deliver on what the protocol says, which is that there shall be unfettered access between GB, NI and NI GB, and there shall be no tariffs, and we will legislate in the course of the next months to guarantee that.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford, on the first of two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition on the tragedy that we witnessed close to Stonehaven, and indeed to the tribute that we had to John Hume from the Leader of the Opposition. John Hume, a man that did so much for the delivery of peace in the island of Ireland. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister told his Cabinet, and I quote, "I am no great nautical expert, but sometimes it is necessary to tack here in response to the facts as they change." It was surprisingly honest for the Prime Minister to admit his government is all at sea. A UK government now defined by 8 U-turns in 8 months. But if the Prime Minister is true to his word, then surely he must see sense and change tack for a 9th time. With the clock ticking for struggling businesses and workers, will the Prime Minister commit today to extend the job retention scheme beyond October? Or is his government making the political choice to accept levels of unemployment last seen under Thatcher in the early 1980s?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I members of opposite of all parties seem to want to extend the furlough scheme, which has already cost this country £40 billion, helped supported 11 million people, but after all keeps them in suspended animation and prevents them from going to work. What we want to do is get people back to work. And that's why I hope he will instead support our Kickstarter scheme to get young people into jobs and support them in those jobs. How much better is that than languishing out of work?
Ian Blackford.
My goodness, Mr. Speaker, languishing out of work. The furlough scheme is there to protect people so they can come back to work when the time is right. Mr. Speaker, France, Germany and Ireland have extended their furlough scheme into 2021. Mr. Speaker, they have made a moral choice. They are not prepared to punish their people with record levels of unemployment. You know, Mr. Speaker, people in Scotland are seeing a tale of two governments. While the Tories are cutting furlough scheme support, yesterday Nicola Sturgeon was announcing new investment to protect jobs, including a youth guarantee. We all know that jobs are under threat if the furlough scheme ends in October. The power to end this threat lies with the Prime Minister. Will he do his duty and extend the furlough scheme, or are we going to return to levels of unemployment last seen under Thatcher with the resultant human misery?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing is not only continuing with the furlough scheme, as he knows, until the end of this month, which is by far more generous, by the way, than anything provided in France or Germany or Ireland. We're continuing with it, but we will also, after that scheme elapses, we will get on with other measures to support people in work. And starting today, there is the Kickstarter scheme to help young people get the jobs that they need. That is in addition to a £160 billion package that we have spent to support the economy throughout this crisis. This government has put its arms around all the people of this country to support them throughout the crisis. That is what we are doing, and we will now help them to get back into work.
Big Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share my right honourable friend's enthusiasm that those who can get back to work safely in their offices should do so. But realistically, many will only want to do so for 2 or 3 days a week. Can I urge him to use his considerable powers of persuasion to encourage the rail industry to introduce immediately flexible season tickets so that those people are not tied into traditional work patterns, both to help many thousands of commuters in areas like mine in Ashford, but also to help save the rail industry?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, and he's absolutely right that we are working at pace with rail companies to try to deliver new products in terms of ticketing, which ensure not just better value, but also enable people to get back to work in a flexible way.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Can I thank the Prime Minister and the Chancellor for the financial and economic interventions their government have made to date. But he will be aware, as much as we want to see people back in work, that there are certain sectors, such as tourism, travel, hospitality and aerospace, where that will not be possible in the short to medium term. Therefore, can I encourage the Prime Minister to look at a targeted extension for those sectors, and also to look at a specific UK-wide scheme to help those so far who have been excluded from the current schemes, including the newly self-employed.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the right honourable gentleman knows, there are a great number of schemes in addition to the job retention scheme that support people in work and in all sorts of sectors of the coronavirus. Loans, the bounce-back loans, the grants that we've made to businesses of all kinds. He mentions the tourism and hospitality sector. We've made huge investments in those. There's a very successful Eat Out to Help Out scheme that we've been running. But it is also very important that we get people back into the workplace in a COVID-secure way. And unlike the Leader of Opposition, we do absolutely everything we can to give them confidence that it is a good idea to go back. And an ounce of confidence, Mr. Speaker, is worth a ton of taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bounce Back Loan Scheme has been a huge success, delivered by the Prime Minister and indeed the Chancellor. 1.3 million loans being granted, vital support for SMEs. But the All-Party Group on Fair Business Banking, which I co-chair, has established that there are 250,000 businesses who currently bank with fintechs and alternative lenders who do not have access to those loans because they cannot get access to the Bank of England's term funding scheme, and lenders who do have those loans are not really accepting loan applications from new customers. Would the Prime Minister use his best offices to persuade the Governor of the Bank of England to open up the term funding scheme to those alternative finance organisations, or open the doors of other lenders who can provide those schemes, those loans, to other SMEs?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. He raises an important point. Those, as he will know, the rules around access to schemes for alternative finance are not the responsibility of my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, but for the Bank of England. But I'm sure the Governor will have heard him today.
We now come to Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the summer months, many people undertake a range of activities. For some, it's camping. For others, it's festivals and events. In my Midlothian constituency, we've got a number of highly successful employers in audiovisual technology, hospitality and creative industries, none of whom can currently undertake their normal activities. In the face of this, when furlough ends, these companies could face collapse. What should I tell them? That the government are today going to extend the scheme to make sure the industry can get back on its feet, or has the government completely given up on them?
Hear, hear. Prime Minister.
Not at all, Mr. Speaker. We've supported the arts industry alone with, I think, about £1.7 billion of support, and in Scotland, as I'm sure he never tires of saying, the overall support for tackling coronavirus has been of the order of about £4 billion, and we will continue to give support. But we happen to think, and I hope it's common ground across the House, we happen to think that it would be better for the UK economy, better for all the people that he rightly cares about, to get back into work, Mr. Speaker.
James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, one positive among the gloom of the COVID pandemic is that this year's I'm a Celebrity will be filmed not in New South Wales, Australia, but in our own North Wales. Even if I cannot tempt the Prime Minister to take part in a Welsh Tucker trial, would he commend ITV on its choice of venue and welcome the positive impact this can have on the regional economy?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right to draw attention to the wonderful attractions of North Wales, which I know very well myself when I tried to get elected there many years ago, unsuccessfully. And I congratulate him on his success, and may it be long repeated.
Heading up to Adrian Shots with Neil Gray. Neil Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this summer, the Treasury floated a story in the Telegraph suggesting a public sector pay freeze to save money. Given so many public sector workers, such as nurses, police, firefighters, teachers and others, have put their lives on the line to fight COVID, surely this would be an unconscionable betrayal. Will the Prime Minister therefore unequivocally not only rule out a pay freeze, but commit to fully funding a package to ensure they are remunerated to reflect their sacrifices?
I must say, I listened carefully to what the honourable gentleman said. He seems to ignore the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we've just had an inflation-busting public sector pay rise, and that nurses alone, as part of the package that we agreed in 2018, have had a 12.5% pay increase since then. I appreciate his sentiments. He's on the right lines, but he should look at what's actually happening.
Angela Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alexander Dennis has been manufacturing buses in Guildford for over 100 years with exciting new low and zero emission vehicles. I'm sure my right honourable friend will be as saddened as I was to hear that 200 jobs have been made redundant locally. Does he agree with me that the fantastic skills these workers have are vital as part of our green recovery? And will he work with me and colleagues to ensure the long-term success of UK bus manufacturing for both domestic and export markets?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her very apposite intervention on behalf of Alexander Dennis. I'm a keen customer, was a keen customer of Alexander Dennis's fantastic machines, and I hope that our green recovery and our massive investment in green buses, and I can't guarantee this, but I hope it will be of benefit to the workforce of Alexander Dennis.
Heading to Swansea West with Geraint Davies. Geraint Davies.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is stumbling forward into mass unemployment with the sudden and universal removal of furlough and towards a further spike and resurgence in coronavirus due to making people who are working from home travel to work. In order to minimise further and future bad decisions and U-turns, will he fully restore the online parliament so that all voters can be fully represented in all debates and all lawmaking, as happens in the Welsh Government and the Scottish Government and the Lords, whether their MPs are shielded or unshielded, so that we make the best decisions with the least harm during the pandemic and during the recession by the reintroduction of proper online democracy?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman. I encourage him to return from New York or Shanghai or wherever he is, and to join us as fast as we can here in this House. And I think actually what the people of this country want to see is their representatives back on their seats as fast as possible in the Palace of Westminster. And that is what we should work for. That's why we're working together to drive down this virus and create a COVID-secure environment.
Andrew Lower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I buy a copy of the Mirror, the Mail or the Telegraph, I'm not required to buy a copy of the Guardian. And yet when I want to watch live TV on Sky, Amazon Prime or ITV, I am forced to pay for the BBC. Does the Prime Minister believe that this is a sustainable situation in the medium or longer term?
My honourable friend makes a very interesting point of view I'm sure shared by many people in this country, but my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, will be setting out a roadmap shortly for reform of the BBC and addressing the very issue that he mentions.
Just going down to Brentford and Isleworth with Ruth Cabray. Ruth Cabray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Financial Times published a list of the 12 government U-turns made under this Prime Minister, from the exam results fiasco to the contact tracing app to the wearing of masks. He's just said that he takes full responsibility. So I wonder which of those 12 U-turns is the Prime Minister's favourite?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, you know, it's a rare privilege to ask a question in the House of Commons. You would have thought they could come up with something better than that. I have to. All I want to say to her is that this is a global pandemic that this government is dealing with extremely effectively at a medical level, and what we want to do now is, in a COVID-secure way, not only get our children back into school, because that's what's happening today, in spite of the I don't know where she's been on this question, but in spite of the leader of the opposition and his colleagues. And what we also want to do is get our country economy back on its feet again and get us back to work. So I hope that she and her colleagues will say that it is also safe to go back to work in a COVID-secure way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be well aware that, welcome though it is, the start of the new term this week will be challenging for all schools. It will be particularly so for Burton Green Church of England Academy in my constituency, where HS2 has just closed the road that many parents use to access the school. It's done that for several months with little notice or consultation, and contrary to assurances given during the passage of the HS2 bill. This is not, as my right honourable friend well knows, the first or only example of high-handedness or poor communication on the part of HS2. So will he please help me to require of HS2 that it does better for the people of Burton Green and elsewhere on the route?
Yes.
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Well, I heartily endorse, I'm afraid, the sentiments that he's expressed. Anybody who's worked with HS2 over the last few years will know that they do treat local residents with, I'm afraid, a high-handed approach, or have done. And what I can tell him, however, is that where there is damage to local roads, HS2 will pay compensation. I will certainly take his point up with HS2.
Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Low public confidence and social distancing measures means many businesses are struggling. If the job retention scheme ends in October, there will be catastrophic consequences for workers, businesses and the economy. So despite earlier waffle from the Prime Minister, I'm asking him again, will he commit to extending the job retention scheme, or are we to expect more government incompetence resulting in unnecessary redundancies and further strains on our already collapsing economy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I direct the honourable lady to what I've said already, which is that there will always be those who argue for an infinite extension of the furlough scheme and who want to keep people off work, unemployed, being paid very substantial sums for a very long time. I don't think that's the right thing. I think the best way forward for our country is to get people, as far as we possibly can, back into work. And there is the job retention bonus, as she knows, at the end of the year, and there are abundant schemes. Already £160 billion has been spent to support the economy throughout the crisis, and we will continue, as I said, to put our arms around the entire people to keep them going throughout this crisis. But furlough, indefinite furlough, is just not the answer.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our nation has a proud history as a safe haven for desperate souls. But now the asylum system is broken and being abused. So the people of Ashfield would like to know, when will the Prime Minister introduce legislation to fix the asylum system, which will save lives by taking back control of our borders?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and I have a great deal of sympathy with those who are so desperate as to put their children in dinghies or even children's paddling pools and try to cross the channel. But I have to say that what they are doing is falling prey to criminal gangs, and they are breaking the law. They're also undermining the the legitimate claims of others who would seek asylum in this country. And that is why we will take advantage of leaving the EU by changing the Dublin regulations on returns, and we will address the rigidities in our laws that make this country, I'm afraid, a target and a magnet for those who would exploit vulnerable people in this way.
Gavin Robinson.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and I trust that the Prime Minister had an enjoyable visit to Harland & Wolff's new yard in Appledore. He knows well the mother yard of Harland & Wolff in my constituency of East Belfast, and I just ask that the Prime Minister not only recognises the important strategic purchase of Appledore, but recognise that Harland & Wolff are now in an incredibly well-placed position to assist this country in our future defence needs.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, and yes, it was incredibly exciting to go to Appledore and see the potential of that yard, and to see what Harland & Wolff is doing there. And also, of course, he's absolutely right in what he says about the potential for various other contracts, both in Devon and in Belfast. But I can't give him now the kind of guarantees that he wants over this dispatch box. But watch this space.
Mr. Blackford, you haven't given me notice of this point of order. I think it is important just to clear up this matter. It isn't normally that I would allow urgent questions to be interfered with or statements, so therefore on this occasion I'm going to allow it. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm most grateful. On Friday the 21st of August, the Daily Mail ran a front-page story revealing the location of the Prime Minister's holiday in Scotland. This was a violation of his family's privacy that neither myself nor my party in any way condone. Later the same day, a senior Conservative source in Downing Street told the Sun newspaper, and I quote, "The finger of blame for all this getting out is being pointed at the SNP, particularly Ian Blackford, who is local." This was subsequently repeated in a number of newspapers and broadcast outlets. This allegation and briefing was entirely and deliberately false. It was a targeted political smear from the Prime Minister's office. The photographer who provided the material for the original Daily Mail front page later confirmed that I was not the source in revealing the Prime Minister's location. A location, I might add, I was not even aware of. However, by this point, the damage was done. This matter has not only been the worst kind of political smear, the false allegation has equally resulted in security implications for myself and my family, given its serious and personal nature. You know, I can see the Prime Minister pulling a face, but all you have to do is to go to social media and see the threats that I was then forced to witness. It is a very serious situation when the apparatus of the UK government can be deployed in this way, manufacturing false briefings in order to attack an opposition politician. I raised this issue with the Prime Minister's office in writing. However, as I have not received a response, I am raising this point of order today to ensure these false briefings are now stopped and are never repeated for any parliamentarian.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, may I first of all say what a wonderful staycation holiday I had in the Right Honourable Gentleman's constituency. What a fantastic part of the world it is, and how thoroughly I commend it to everybody. It's absolutely beautiful location. He's very lucky to represent it. On the substantive point that he raises, I'm very happy to accept the assurances that he gives. However, I just draw his attention to, he talks about going to social media. I draw his attention to a tweet by a chap called Torquil Crichton on 17th of August, saying, "Ferocious midge count in Wester Ross tonight, I hear, must be bad if you're fair-skinned and camping," and to which an account that purports to be the Right Honourable Gentleman, but I'm sure it isn't because of what he has just said, says, "I wonder if an education at Eton stands you in good stead for these blighters." Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that he had I'm happy to accept his assurances and his protestations, and I think we should leave it at that, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. What I would like to say, obviously, Mr Brennan, thank you. Can I just say what I'm very concerned about is the security implication to the Prime Minister and the security implication to the leader of the SNP. Please, can I just say to everyone, let's be very, very careful and let's learn from this. And obviously, it is on the record from both parties, and I hope we can draw a line under it. But please, let's take each other's security very, very serious. Thank you. In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I am now suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order.